show, plug our sponsor, facegames.com, the #1 place to get your Magic the Gathering singles. This week, 15% off all high-end scan cards. So if you're a baller or if you've been playing some Eternal formats, you might want to check out everything between. There's a lot of collector's edition stuff on sale as well that we have in stock. So go to facegames.com right now or go check. I don't know if we have Stoneforge Mystics anymore, but here, back on the show. Actually, no, not back on the show. It's going to be new regular monthly guest. Shaheen Sarani is going to be joining us. Is joining us for this episode, along with Las Vegas Magic Fest Las Vegas participants Jonathan Zhang and Elliot Fortier talking about their adventures. But we've got to get the man. How's it going, Shaheen?
It's going all right, bud. I like that title, monthly guest. It's a lot better than whatever it was before.
It was like greatest, most highest returning guest ever. So let's get. We didn't have you on when they first announced the Rivals League and all the additional stuff like the new tour that they have, the new Players Tour. Wanted to get your thoughts on it. On the show, I talked about how some people viewed the Rivals potentially as a replacement for just Platinum, so it doesn't fill that gold fix for you. Is that true? What was your reaction to all of that?
No, I disagree. I think it's it's kind of like a mix between gold and platinum. Um, it's not the point of gold, platinum, or silver, whatever. It just had we needed something to fill the void of having the ability to rack up points on near misses to achieve some type of continuity in at the professional level. So like I read the details of that and I wasn't satisfied, so I started a tweet storm against or with Wizards and Magic Esports, and they were pretty responsive to everybody. But to me, they said some real spicy nuggets my way, sent them my way. They said, we know that near misses at Grand Prix need to be a way of qualification. So they just them telling me that that's going to be the future is a gold equivalent to me. And I even asked that my tweet exactly was, I should pull it up, but I do was, near consistent finishes in Grand Prix or consistent finishes at high level tournaments need to be a qualification path, and they said it will be. So if they're going to do near misses at Grand Prix and then rack up a point system for that or some type of system with that, that is gold because you can achieve pro status without playing in the Players Tour, playing in whatever the equivalence is, Mythic Championship. So I'm happy with the announcement. I mean, it could have been nothing, which is what a lot of us were expecting. It could have been. It sounded like and I hate to say it, but without feedback, without pressure for the last year from a lot of people. I mean, I'm just one out of the thousands that pressured them. That they were quite happy with having 200-person pro tours, and having it just qualify. The only way you qualify through being in the MPL or qualify by winning a PTQ exactly or winning top 8 at Grand Prix exactly. And it sounds like they really took into consideration a lot of our issues and with that and made some changes. So I'm still waiting on the details, but as right now, this moment, August 27th, I'm pretty happy about their responsiveness in that last barrage of tweets, and also the skeleton framework they provided us.
So are you going to be back on the grind per se? Have your plans changed based on this news?
No, I really want to pursue Star City. I think that being on the East Coast and not taking advantage of that is kind of foolish. Mainly because I've never been an A list player. I've always considered myself in kind of like the B minus pro squad. Not really even a dig on myself, just the amount of time I'm willing to put in the game. But even as a B minus player, I was able to do some pretty good things on the tour. So I enjoyed the success there. Really it was a nice little money boost. It helped promote me to a spot with content creation that I'm pretty happy about. So like I do want to give that a whirl. So I mean I'm still going to play Wizards events. Before I was going to play zero, but now I'll play local ones. I'll go to local Grand Prix I can drive to. I'll see how it goes, and if I accidentally trip into Grand Prix first place, and I found myself in the thick of things for qualifying for whatever the gold equivalency is. If when they announce actually the full details instead of this skeletal framework, then I obviously will do a hard switch. But at this point, the lucrative calling of the tour is there, and as you know, you have a lot of Canadian brethren that have already crossed the border to try to dominate the tour because of that same aspect. I think that playing in a tournament series that you're more capable of dominating or at least performing high level in is another side dream to the pro alternative when the pro alternative is not very good. So both. That's my answer.
All right, let's jump to one of the spiciest news this past Monday. We knew it was coming. We knew something was going to happen, and it seemed like one of your predictions came true, Sheen. So, what are your feelings when you read the news on Monday?
Well, I have to set the record straight. Actually, all my predictions came true. So let's get that nipped in the bud there. So I predicted Faithless Looting getting banned, Hogaak getting banned, and Stoneforge Mystic being unbanned. I actually wrote an article before Bridge from Below was banned, saying that Faithless Looting, Hogaak, and Stoneforge would be unbanned. That was my 3 for that as well. But I helped even after they banned Bridge from Below. My next article was, this is not going to be enough. These decks are dumb, and it finally came around to it. I think obviously if you're coming from a financial point of view, they don't want to ban a card in the set they just released. I mean, it's just bad. It's fiscally irresponsible for them. So I mean, they obviously just hoped it would go away, and it didn't. But the Stoneforge Mystic unban, obviously, when I read that, I was just doing a social media victory lap all day and wasn't getting any work done at work. And I was just tweeting at people, and people were obviously like interacting with me. It was really fun. Aaron Forsyth got into the game a little bit. He tweeted at me a little bit because I was talking about JIT being the next mission, and then he's like tweeted a meme of like me getting dragged off stage like from I Love Lucy back in the day. So obviously it's all in good fun. It was really like a super great announcement. I mean, it's the exact formula that needed to be kicked in to do to Modern what old Extended had going for it. And for those watching and weren't competitive back when Extended was around, the games just went longer, and it's because the format obviously rotated and the cards were weaker. But if you're going to have a non-rotating format that you want to be longer games in Legacy and more interactive, you got to Faithless Looting is a huge barrier for that. And I wrote extensively about how it removes play design wiggle room, and future sets and cards have to fall into this will Faithless Looting break it mentality. So I knew Faithless Looting had to go at some point, and they're just kicking the can down the road because you just can't print good graveyard cards ever with Faithless Looting around. It just promotes free aggressive creatures. So there's no reason ever to cast a Thalia or Monster Mentor. You can always play those in these tier 2 decks. There's no reason to play creature decks when you put them all into play for free after 1 or 2 cantrip style effects. So the announcements are great. Every last one was amazing. Hogaak had to go. Faithless Looting for future health of Modern had to go, and Stoneforge Mystic, one of the most fair cards that Modern could actually have, should have been unbanned ages ago. And it was asinine. It was banned this long, and somebody dug at Aaron. I don't know if you saw Forsyth's initial tweet where he said people love to say, "Oh, this tweet didn't age well," and he retweeted it, what he was getting ragged on for. And it was the debate him and I were having. I'm the next comment under his tweet, like one under, and it's when he said Blue White's winning everything. They don't need Stoneforge Mystic. It has all these top 8s, and I came back and said it has like 5 top 8s in 5 years, and it all happened at one time. I'm like, the deck has been getting mauled since 2011. Are you kidding me? And I kept accusing him of like cherry picking stats and all this. But they work with the best information they have, and I know his mission of Modern is not the same as mine. I want Control to be playable as a sidebar, but him and I come together when it's about format health, because when the format is 30 different aggro decks and combo decks, then Control can never be good. And he doesn't want that either. Nobody wants that. So when that is fixed, we actually all win. So it was just great. Announcement was great.
So I'm gonna go straight to John here, who once he read the announcement, he told me this is one of the most frustrating news he's ever received. So I gotta hear it from the other side. Take it away, John.
Oh, Neoform's busted now. What are you talking about?
I don't know about Shaheen. I feel a bit dazed and confused. But anyways, Hogaak ban. I think it's completely, everyone expected it. I do have some issues with the other two bans. I might like history may look back and say my reasonings are wrong, but here are my feelings. So I guess faithless looting. I think I don't think it's done anything wrong. People can argue with me. I think it creates for pretty interesting like deck designing. If you look at the type of cards that type of decks that Faithless Looting has spawned, like Red Phoenix, Is It Phoenix, Mardu Pyromancer, Hollow One, Dredge. I think those are all like pretty like interesting in their own ways, even if they may be a bit frustrating. And power level wise, I don't think they were, and none of them were like close to like oppressive enough to warrant a ban. I do understand the concern that concern that it restricts future designs. Like I get it, but like I think we have to focus on the end result here. As long as like these like interesting cards are still being printed and none of the decks are oppressive enough, I didn't think that they really warranted a ban. On a personal level, my two biggest finishes were with Grishrobrand, with which I topped 4-day Grand Prix, and Dredge, which one I won the Star City with. And I personally am feeling like the personal effect of, just having my 2 years of like, playtime and like deck expertise, as well as my paper collection, just like going like vaporizing and going down in flames. That's really frustrating. And I really do consider myself to be a modern refugee right now. I like people say that the cost of modern cost of banning goes beyond just the cards. It's just like people getting stranded and all that, and I'm just feeling that right now. Stoneforge Mystic, I think it is a bit too good. Certainly, I've never played it with it, so like it's to be seen. But like my personal effect is that the cost of including a Stoneforge package is so relatively low that any white deck, anywhere from control, aggro to even mid range, to even combo, can and should be starting with Stoneforge, the Stoneforge package. And I do have some worries that it'll start to like homogenize like a lot of decks, even if it's like a creature mid-range archetype or a control archetype, or even combos that can play white. They can juke their post board games by having like a sideboard Stoneforge package and all that. So I'm a bit worried that it can and may homogenize a lot of the decks in the format, but I'm not that experienced with the card itself, so I hope I'm wrong.
Elliot, what was your reaction to all of this?
Well, we were sitting in our Airbnb, like getting ready to leave for our flight, and like there's a couple of people kind of getting showered, getting ready, that kind of thing. Rest of us in the living room, and one guy goes, "The unbanned Stoneforge and banned looting," and then we're like, "All right, yeah, good joke, good joke." And then another guy like refreshes his phone, like, "No, it's real," and then like people keep filtering in from the other room, like, "Hey guys, what happened?" Like, freak out again, and it's I don't know, it's crazy to me. I really genuinely did not expect them to do anything other than ban Hogaak. And not only did we get this like big shift in modern, but like I guess standard doesn't really matter. Rampage Frostline, who cares? But like 5 cards changed in vintage, which I think is like unprecedented for that format. Normally they like let it stew because who cares? Um, but as for the actual changes, I'm definitely in between the middle. I think that Stoneforge is far from too good for modern, but I think that there's like no obligation to just legalize every card that's not too unfair for modern. So I kind of would have preferred to have not unbanned it, but now that it is legal, like I don't really care. I think it's going to do a bit of warping of the fair decks around it. I think decks like Jund are going to be obligated to be playing more Kolaghan's commands, and any deck that plays white is probably going to try to go a little bit out of its way for Stoneforge, especially for the next month or so until things settle down, which is the exact trend we saw with Blood Red Elf and Jace, where those cards have kind of settled into the positions they have, but they're far from obtuse in the format. It's the Faithless Looting one that I'm more agreeing with John on. I think that if going back, I've been playing Modern for like 5 years now. pretty competitively, and every single graveyard deck I've ever seen has played Faithless Looting, which is an argument that it's so ubiquitous, it's so strong that it should be banned. But on the other hand, there's not been a single modern graveyard deck that's been powerful enough without Faithless Looting to compete. The closest thing that we've ever gotten is these Thopter Sword decks, which you don't play looting because it like stretches the mana too thin, and you don't necessarily want to be putting any old card in your graveyard. It's just the Thopter Sword combo you want. So I think that banning looting is a mistake because it's effectively banning all of the graveyard decks at one time. And it might be the case that banning every single card that's in a graveyard deck that makes it too good, other than looting, is too aggressive of a ban strategy for WotC to want to implement. But I think in my perfect world where I have like total control over the ban list, as soon as Dredge is too good, you don't ban looting, you ban the best Dredger, or maybe you ban Thug or something. And maybe if Grizzlebrand Goryo's Vengeance is too good somehow, you ban Goryo's Vengeance or something like that. And I would rather just keep going after the specific deck card that's utilizing Faithless Looting than just looting itself.
Shaheen, do you want to respond to all this stuff?
I don't think I have enough time. Just disagree with all of it, and usually I agree with you fellows on about everything. But Faithless Looting is not. We're really thinking in a two-dimensional game when it's three-dimensional. We're thinking about immediate application, thinking about graveyard decks not being good, and that's just not. I mean, back in my day when Modern really kickstarted, and 5 years ago could explain it. Even like Living End was a graveyard deck that was relatively competitive. You can go through a list of collected company style decks that use the graveyard with Eternal Witness. I mean, there's a lot of strategies out there that obviously without Faithless Looting and are not tier one, but that's the point. They don't want tier one decks. And John mentioned how diverse the decks of Dredge and Hollow One and Phoenix, those are all the same deck. Same exact deck, just different colors. They put in a bunch of Phoenixes, use Manamorphose and Abusive free spells, put them into play, or you put in a bunch of cantrip, cycle, put in a bunch of Hollow Ones. To call those a diverse set of decks is, I think, it's a very incorrect analysis of it, and the definition of homogenous. So I don't think I think that we are really focusing on these poor graveyard decks, and you guys might suffer from what I suffer from, and I admit it all the time that I have a bias toward control decks, and I think maybe you guys really preferred you found the games with Faithless Looting, these graveyard decks very interesting, and the gameplay was dynamic. But players that kind of have been around for a bit and seen other formats, maybe you guys have seen it too, and maybe in older standard or in the old extended, when formats are real healthy, you can play a Gruul or a Zoo deck with a bunch of Burning Tree emissaries or Shaman. Is it Shaman emissary? Emissary with Wild Nacatls, and those would be competitive in the format of Modern because there aren't 3 prize amalgams and 2 bloodghast in play on turn 2. And that's what you're going to see more of. And I think that the price to pay for keeping looting around and piecemealing the bans as it goes along, the community becomes irate at that. And they tried that before, and it's just much more of a negative aura floating around. If you look at the overall aura of these bans, it's overwhelmingly positive. But for the first time, usually it's mayhem, and people, especially like when Twin got banned, and people were like, "My deck's gone." And John's that point is true. The hurt of bannings is always the biggest negative. The format health obviously is important to me, but like you are really hitting somebody for a good $500 to $1,000, depending on how much of that graveyard or how much of that deck you have built, or multiple decks off the same strategy. So that part is shitty, and that comes from just poor play design from back in the day, not really planning out these cards like Hogaak and et cetera. So that concern is definitely real. But to ban one piece at a time as they get more powerful, there would be a riot, I think. And I think that they know some sick graveyard things are coming down the pike, and you can tell from the power of Hogaak that they're not done with that yet, that they've built similar cards coming down the pike. So this ban of Faithless Looting is, again, we're thinking two-dimensionally. But in a few sets from now, we're all going to come back and go, oh yeah. I mean, they know that more cards that they want to sell in packs are going to come make Faithless Looting too good. And to the point of Stoneforge, I don't think running. I think Jundex will put in one more or two more Colligans commands, like go from 0 to 1 to 2 or 3, and start mauling Stoneforge Mystic decks. If I've had in Legacy end of turn Batter Skull and they command me, I just die inside, die outside, die everywhere. It's just horrible. And you think it's a 1-for-1, but not really. I mean, you spend so much of your mana in your game plan to set that up, and they get you for a 3-mana instant. It's pretty bad. Also, cards just like Abrupt Decay, they kill your guy, Liliana, make you sack Stoneforge. I've played so many matches of not old, one series when Stoneforge was legal in Old Extend. I played one PTQ season, but also played it for 5 years or three and a half, 4 years straight in Legacy, where I played against all these cards, and it's just not. It's good, but it's not going to be enough to warp players to shift their current decks around enough to beat it. And on the final point, I think that Stoneforge Mystic will homogenize some, so I partially agree with John there. But I don't think it's going to do it to the point that you're saying. I think that you're going to see it in control decks, you're going to see it in aggro decks. You're going to see it in a lot of any deck with Aether Vial at the beginning. But I fear it may fall into the Jace problem, fear to fall into the Bloodbraid problem, the Boogeyman of Standard, that once you get some gameplay with it, it's a lot better in our brains than it is in application. I think it's good. I think it's better than Jace, but I don't think it's going to revolutionize Modern in a negative way. And I think it's going to enhance white decks because these white decks were real bad, a lot of them, and now they're going to get a lot better, which is great. So, like I said, it's a long-winded response, but you guys said a lot. I just in staunch disagreement on your take on Faithless Looting and Stoneforge.
We wouldn't
Buddy,
expect.
still love y'all.
We wouldn't expect any less from you, Shane. John, any retort to that, or Elliot? Any quick?
I just want to say I do think Stoneforge is not too good for Modern. I mean, fair decks have historically never been busted in Modern, so I'm definitely not afraid. I do admit that over the past, I don't know, 2 or 3 years, I've played a lot more Faithless Looting decks than anything else, so maybe I am a bit biased about that. But also, 6 months down the line, if we get Careful Study or something, we definitely couldn't have Faithless Looting and Careful Study, but without Faithless Looting, maybe that's a reasonable card. They could even introduce it to the format through Standard. They don't have to do a Modern Horizons 2, wouldn't be too busted there. So this isn't the end all of graveyard decks, but maybe if you're looking to play Dredge, you have to play Burning Inquiry or something, which is less than ideal. But at the end of the day, it's Modern's one of those formats where if you love Modern, you're not going to put it down. And if you don't like Modern, you're only going to play it when it's your local Grand Prix and just have fun.
Shaheen, where did you have blue-white in terms of power level before the banning and now right after?
I think it stays at tier 1.5, very close to tier 1. I think it's probably in the top 5 decks. I think it was 5th before. It might be 3rd or 4th now. I do find it comically ridiculous and hilarious that people are like, even Ali, I had to pick on him on Twitter, and a few others are posting memes that, oh, I like these Stoneforge decks. I'm just going to Karn Liberate them. I'm like, are you kidding? That's blue-white's only good matchup. Blue-white mushes Tron. Like, what? We played tested for both Pro Tours, and I was 15-1 in our group against Tron. Some stupid number. Even on camera against Yuza, when I won a couple Pro Tours ago, I surgical to Tron land into an open Relic of Progenitus, and he just removed his Tron land response. I was already on a mulligan, and still just crushed him. This doesn't even matter. So I think it's gonna. I think the reaction, if people try to pivot to big mana against a 4 Field of Ruin Surgical Extraction deck, then I think blue-white could even move up another rank, maybe, depending on how bad people's perception of the matchup is.
John, do you think blue-white? Go ahead, John.
Let me jump in here. At first, I have a lot of respect for blue-white to the point that where I've said that blue-white has been silently oppressive as they've gone from spell-based, stack-based control to more prison type of archetype. And I actually do think and have thought that blue-white's like secretly being one of the best decks out there. And I think like Stoneforge, I'm assuming they will play, but I'm not an expert. Maybe Shaheen can like opine later, but I do think this will like be another cherry on the cake. And I expect week 0 and week 1 to be a meta game where blue white is going to be unquestionably tier 1. I just want to go back to the point before where, you know, about fifth excluding, and I think that like one of the things that people don't really like think about is that like as long as your deck is not like oppressive power level wise, it always has like a spotting its like food chain. Like, you know, Dredge does police like blue white somewhat. Dredge does police like other decks like Burn, and you know, like these, I feel like these graveyard decks just got canceled altogether, and I can't think of like graveyard deck that's like even like tier 2 now. Like Sodak, the noted Dredge Master, is playing Tone Scour for God's sake, and you know, he's still winning with it, but I can't see the foreseeable future how that can be even close to tier 1 and tier 2. And the moment Dredge disappears, like other decks that have been oppressed by Dredge comes back, and you know, maybe people will think that blue, white, or Jund is too oppressive. I don't know, but that's certainly a possibility, right? But back to the point, I do think that a lot of people are pretty like outdated in terms of the perception and how Tron is how blue white is a buy for Tron and all that. And every time I tested Tron in the last 2 weeks, 2 years, like I felt the strength of the power creep between Field of Ruin, Citra, Azcanta, Jace, Teferi, and all that, and Force Negation. And I just couldn't beat blue white anymore. You know, they could either kill me by Field of Ruining and Surgicaling, even in game 1, or they could just like carve like 1-for-1 you into oblivion while they force your first thing after you play your Jace, and like you can out card advantage Tron, and I don't think it's a good matchup anymore. So I do think that blue white's going to be tier 1 for the next like month or so until people figure it out. I do think like Valakut is actually very good right now. I don't think there's anything fast at the moment, and I've been thinking of, you know, trying like a Valakut list with like 2 or 3 like Chandra, Awakened Inferno, just for the blue-white matchup. Maybe that's good. I don't know, but I definitely do think that blue-white has been secretly tier 1 for the better part of the last 2 years, and I'm going to continue to respect it.
Elliot, what do you think about blue-white?
I think it's definitely a solid choice going forward. I was afraid to play it against quite a few lot of decks I was testing in the past few months. I know that I wasn't excited to play against it with mono red, and I don't think I was too excited to play against it with Hogaak, because some of their nut draws are like kind of unbeatable for you, and you're supposed to be the one presenting that. But I wasn't super experienced with Hogaak by any means, so I might be totally off on that one. Going forward, I think that it does run into a bit of a risk of getting snowballed by Stoneforge Mystic, by your opponent's Stoneforge Mystic, but definitely from deck building side, you can play more things like Spell Snare and such to prevent that, and of course, a single path just breaks that up. So if you were like the blue-white guy for the past 2 years, I think you should be rubbing your hands together, personally.
Shane, you already know what your version, how many Stoneforges you're going to be playing?
You have to play 4 in Stoneblade. Like Azorius control. I think you can play less. And well, my first reaction with Stoneforge Mystic is obviously going to play Urza for the Grand Prix coming up in Indianapolis. I'm playing with Ely and Corey Baumeister, and we're going to probably play a bunch of Urza decks with Stoneforge Mystic and start off there. I know it's kind of blasphemy, but I even wrote about it this week. Coming up is going to be, I know you guys really want blue white from me, but I'm going to start with the busted deck first and see how Stoneforge plays in. So we you know, replaces the Goblin Engineer, and we're not convinced that it's better, but on paper it obviously looks a lot better, and they've already started testing and they're really liking it. So I'm going to be in that realm, but I agree with what both gentlemen said, that like Elliot said, it's going to be one of those decks that people are rubbing their hands together, excited about, and it just got better with this piece. And yeah, like it always has been really good in a metagame that is defined. It's good when you can dedicate your sideboard to certain matchups. I think now with the format without Faithless Looting, you don't have to dedicate 7 to 8 slots to beat, these Hogaak decks or even the old looting decks. So you're able to just to play like 2 surgical, 1 rest in peace. You get to put 2 stoning silences back in your deck to handle or as another artifact decks. You get to play the full diverse sideboard suite to handle the 5 or 6 matchups you want to beat. And I think blue white's going to be it could definitely I can definitely see it oppressive, especially if you're playing a very linear strategy that falls into its sideboard plan.
So we've got some questions in chat. This one's from Puppy Puncha, who I know is Cody Crosby, a friend of mine. I can understand the power creep argument, but was it even a year ago when blue white was main decking Spreading Seas just for that matchup?
Yeah, that was before Field of Ruin. It was when it was good. I mean, Field of Ruin was out with Spreading Seas, and then I was a champion against both being in the deck. It was ridiculous. Like once Field of Ruin came out, I wrote a month, 2 months worth of articles like, why are we all still playing Spreading Seas? The matchup is not hard. It's like it plays very, and I hate to simplify decks and show like into a series of plays, but this is how game 1 goes. If you have 1 2-mana counterspell in your hand by turn 2, you counter their spell and then you Field of Ruin them. And it's not exactly like a hard setup to do. It's a 4 of and maybe a 6 or 7 of, depending on back in the day how many interactive spells you played. So you have so many ways to handle them. Then now you have Force of Negation, which is even sicker. Now your hands can be so diverse with your counter spells and your interaction, where you're doing the same thing. You counter them and you Field of Ruin. Obviously, game 1, if you don't draw Field of Ruin, then you're kind of in a world of hurt. But I've even beat Tron with just natural counter spells, tapping out for Planeswalker on my turn, Force of Negation on their turn, untapping, Jace Brainstorm, hit Field of Ruin them. To say that Tron was tough back then, you would have to go before Field of Ruin, maybe right at the inception of it when people were still not really playing for Field of Ruin, not really playing the matchup well enough, still kind of skimping on counter spells. But now that matchup's been a straight up joke for the better part of 6 months. I mean, like it's funny because blue white doesn't beat anything. Like I was testing like on a consistent basis. I was 45% against everything. I was happy with that. I'll try to maneuver my way to wins. You have to draw the right side of your deck still. It was, you don't have any good counter or cantrips. You can't really control your draw steps the way you want to against certain matchups. So like to say when I tell you it was a good matchup, this was the good matchup, and the others were still tough. Even Eldrazi Tron was kind of tough back in the day, but good old fashioned E-Tron, Monogreen Tron was.
Okay, so we'll let you go. What's next for you, my friend?
So we are going to a team Grand Prix in Indianapolis, not this weekend, next weekend. We're all gold still, but we're going to go anyway for fun because I don't miss team tournaments. So team already qualified, going to go try to crush some dreams and play some modern. And after that, we got a couple Star Cities, an invitational, and then I'm actually going to go to a honeymoon with my wife in Italy, but we're going to play in the Grand Prix in Italy there at the end of November. That's she let me do it, so I'll be in Italy playing some Legacy.
Sick. Is it your first time in Italy?
Yeah, and I've been around Europe but I've never been to. I think they maybe have like one Italian Pro Tour, and I didn't make it to that one, so I'm excited.
Okay. All right. Best of luck, and we'll see you soon. Monthly host.
Always fun. Thanks, guys.
All right. That's Shaheen Sarani. Always a pleasure to have him on the show. And let's get away from that. Let's go before the ban. I have to say, at the Montreal MCQ, if people thought people weren't coming up to these things, they were wrong. As the cap was 226, despite a lot of people, including some of my friends, fan of the show, Sébastien Lachance, Elliot, going to Vegas, 224 players at 226 cap. That broke our record. for at least a Montreal event. We've never had this many people for any open or any. It was the most attended MTG event that I think, obviously outside of GPs and stuff, that we've hosted here. So um, sweet to see that, and sweet to Bosu top 8 it. Fortunately, he lost, but also fortunately for me because he lost to another friend of mine, Vincent Tebow, who ended up winning with Eldrazi Tron. Elliot, I think that's usually a good matchup for Hogaak, I imagine.
Yeah, it was one of those matchups that Hogaak was really favored in, except the games where Etron was on the play and had a Chalice for 1 and maybe had a Leyline in the sideboard games. But in the sideboard games, Force of Vigor is just insane because the only cards you care about are an Artifact and an Enchantment. So.
Damn, I don't know if I unmuted myself there. So, anyways, it doesn't matter. I will repiece this together. If you will miss my question, I was just talking about how the Face Montreal MCQ was a success. We almost hit the cap at 224 players, and then my friend won with Eldrazi Tron. And when he told me the matchup, when he told me the deck he was playing in a assuming Hogaak filled field, I was worried for him, and then when he won, I was quite surprised because he's been consistently playing Eldrazi Tron for a while now, because he actually won one of the face-to-face opens either a year or 2 years ago, an Open Plus I think, with Eldrazi Tron, and typical, he's been piloting it forever story. But okay, let's get to your tournament first, Elliot. What did you play in Vegas, and why did you end up getting the deck from one of our loyal listeners?
Yeah, so I played Hogaak. A couple weeks ago, we had a show where I decried myself a Neoform player. I had a fully stamped passport into the Cabal. I was ready to play it. Testing was going well, and then I kind of set a floater out. If you have the deck, hit me up. And Joel Smith, a fan of the show from Saskatchewan, hit me up on Twitter. I met him. I registered the deck without it in my hands and met him like 50 minutes before my first round began to get it. So a bit of a stressful moment, but came in clutch. Uh, and then my GP went pretty well. I had finished day 1 at 7-2, which is not exactly where you want to be, but I'm glad I won the last round because at least it put me on some pressure to behave that night, and have my head in the game for the second day. And then I lost actually a couple tough ones on day 2. I lost to Dredge, where I just like couldn't see a ley line at all in either of our post board games, and my opponent like never had an answer, just always had like a Dredge hand. So it was a bit unfortunate. And then I lost to Jund as well, which really doesn't feel good because I think Jund is awful. But it was just like a combination of Plague Engineers and me keeping Force of Vigor hands that really didn't do much just because they were playing Leyline. So I finished at 10-4-1. I ID'd the last round. It was actually I sat down across from my opponent. I had done the math. I knew that we were drawing into either min cash or a good chance at better than min cash, with no chance at hitting like a top 64. And they were just like super excited to be cashing their first GP. So a bit of a feel good moment at the end of the day, and I got to leave the venue and get hydrated a little sooner than previous.
So you're saying your adventures, your misadventures during the later nights at Vegas did not really negatively affect your result.
Yeah, well, I mean, luckily I didn't have anything to do on the Sunday. Let's just say that. And luckily I only had to leave my Airbnb at like 9 o'clock to get to the airport in time.
Did you have fun in your first time staying there? Like, what did you enjoy?
Oh, it was absolutely insane. On our first night, because most of us had day 2 of the GP to play, or I think a couple people also did the limited GP, which was not initially in the plans. We decided we were like, oh, we'll take it easy tonight. We'll just go to Fremont Street, because none of us had ever been there before. The other guys had only been to the Strip when they came, and so I was expecting like some kind of rundown bars because everyone told me this is the old Strip. So I was expecting, like some random bars and some casinos. And then we walk there and then there's like 2 miles of just covered like LCD display on top screens. It's like 11 at night and it's brighter than anything. And so maybe I could have been a bit more tame, but that was an absolutely insane experience. And it was great. Unfortunately, like I was so excited for the food, and we ended up skipping dinner 2 of the nights just to continue to be belligerent. But I did finally get some Korean barbecue on the Sunday, which was very nice. I didn't get to go to Lotus Siam, so I'll have to book my flight for next year.
Yeah, I think definitely I hope to make it to that one as well. I definitely missed some Lotus. Okay, let's go to John's tournament. John, rooting for you hard, obviously, just rooting for both of you, but you slightly more just because of the deck choice you made, and you went on quite a hot start. So anyway, I'll just let you take it away.
It was a weekend of small margins coming to bite me. I think with like a few better bounces, I could have easily been in the top 8. But it's hard to say because I also got lucky in certain spots, so that's fine. For those people that don't know, I was 11-2 and then lost twice, which is great. I was on a feature match twice, which is great. All day, I was just complaining about how, they're never going to show Neoform on camera. And I haven't played Hogaak in like forever. I just want to farm them. And then round 11 comes when I'm 10-1 and I'm on camera, and I go on feature match against Hogaak. I'm just like, wow, it's like I get to farm them on camera. Like I get to show everyone peak modern that is Neoform versus Hogaak. Of course, I get punished and lose. I think I got a bit unlucky. I had Grizzle Brown out in all 3 games. I shouldn't lose a game like that, but I did. But it's whatever. And then 2 rounds later, I'm still 11-2, and I just need to win out to make the top 8 and requalify. I'm up against Burn on a feature match. I'm like, okay, fine, it's bye. And then I lose in 2 games. I just get swept. So it's just all my losses were close. All my losses were good matchups. I genuinely believe that I had the opportunity to get Hogaak, and I genuinely believe that I still would have played Neoform. I think it was a very unique spot where the bad matchups were nowhere. The deck is powerful, consistent enough. I wrote about it. I wrote so many words about it. And I just couldn't get there. I almost did. I appreciate everyone's support and on Twitter throughout the days. And shout out to Chuck Pierce and his friends who came up to me. And he was going for a 9-0. He lost in the 8-0 bracket and kind of fizzled out at the end. But he was playing Neoform as well. His 2 friends were playing Neoform as well. He just tweeted at me. He said that his Neobrand Cabal went 31-14 between 3 players, and I went 11-4. So collectively, the 6 Neoform players in day 2, I think, got like 70% win rate. So I think that was really a good choice for the weekend. I really wish that a few bounces went my way, so I could have gone to the top 8 and I could have just cleaned up Hogaak and won the Grand Prix. But it is what it is. But it was a good weekend.
Can't watch that. Can't listen to that without smiling. John, did you mention the Neoform, the friendly fire on day 2? Was it that guy? Did I miss it?
Yes. So let me tell you, this was the pinnacle of modern. We're both 10-2. We're at table 6, and it's a Neoform mirror. Game 1, he turn 1 combos me, but fizzles and dies because he can't pay for his pact. Game 2, I turn 1 combo him, but I fizzle, and he beats me. This is modern at its peak. It was beautiful. It was art. Modern. This Neoform mirror round 12, high stakes. Both players still in the running for top 8. It was beautiful. It was how modern was supposed to be played.
I'm trying to find the tweet I made also about Matt Stein basically tweeted how he was playing the MCQ and he had like a 5-turn match where he just, I'm sure that's pretty regular for you as well to finish a round with probably over 40 minutes left on the clock.
Actually, not so much, because the actual logistics of comboing in terms of like drawing the 7 cards and counting your library size and just just dividing your hand into useful cards and not. It takes a bit of time, but definitely fast. And I actually got a lot of people that came up to me and say, hey, your final nub, I really liked your article, even if they weren't playing. So that was really cool. Shout out to people who came up and said hi to me. I really appreciated it.
So where do you move from now, Mr. Refugee? Now with blue white to some people, like I think Spencer, who was watching us on Facebook, commented like how he's always felt blue white was tier one. I think a lot of our listeners felt that way, and now it's got an extra tool. Like what's a guy to do? What's a guy like you to do?
So I dropped some truth bombs in Twitch chat, but let me do it again. Blue white has been on the rise quietly and have like developed into a silent like prison assassin in the last 2 years for a few reasons. One, power creep has been insane. Before they had to like try to beat people with like Gideon Jura and Elspeth, and like those cards in this economy, no way, no fucking way. Anyways, they've gotten Field of Ruin, Dovin's Veto, Force of Negation, Teferi, Jace. These are powerful, powerful cards. And secondly, their few bad matchups were one, to big mana, because they didn't have inevitability and they don't have land destruction, and two, spell-based combos, which can choke their expensive counter spells and mana. And those holes have both been plugged. Field of Ruin and Jace the Mind Sculptor means you can like field them once and then like one for one outgrind them. Easy. And against like spell-based combo, which has had traditionally good matchups against blue-white, like Storm was like an 80-20 favorite against blue-white. Brand, ad nauseum, same things. Some of them play Pact Negation, and Dovin's Veto says LOL. And Storm, like all those decks are hurt by like Teferi, which negates Pact Negations and like Giga Drill setups, as well as like Narset and Force Negation. So they've gotten so many freaking good cards, and I don't think blue white mages can kind of complain anymore. I think blue white legitimately is good, and they legitimately have my respect. And if I was a better Magic player, I would try to play blue white. But as it is now, everyone and their mom's playing Stoneforge Mystic decks, and I do have a modern PTQ in 3 weeks, and I think I'm going to start at big mana. And big mana that can beat blue white. And I think that's Valakut. I don't think anyone's pressuring me right now. I don't think there are any degenerate like graveyard combo decks that can like pressure you like Hogaak or Brand did that would terrorize Valakut. And I think the more the format goes fair, like Goblins or Soul Herder or whatever, or these like Stoneforge Mystic decks, the better it is for like a big mana deck to just like prey on them. And Valakut can beat other big mana decks like Tron, who they're favored against. And blue white, if I have more like Chandra Awakened Inferno, I can ramp into her like, turn 4 or turn 5. I think Valakut might be in a very good spot. So that's where I'll start.
Elliot, what about you? Do you care about Modern moving forward right now? What's on the horizon in the land of Elliot?
Well, I do have a PTQ at the end of the month that's Modern, and Grand Prix Montreal is the first weekend of October, which has the new structure that features 5 PTQs, and it's possible there's a PTQ every single day that's Modern. So depending on how I feel in the week leading up to that, I might play Modern there as well. My next event is Legacy though, so I don't know how much I'll invest in Modern in the next couple weeks, but I did just bird Andy playing some matches or some leagues on Moto with Blue-Red Living End, and it honestly looked pretty incredible. I think he went 8-2, losing to Humans and forget the second one. So Humans is like definitely one of your near 0% matchups because Meddling Mage is so hard to beat. But I think the deck has some serious legs. I think it's like really good against the fair decks, really good against the creature decks that people are playing to support Stoneforge Mystic, because the first living end is just Wrath of God on top of putting 20 power play. And actually, it's kind of weird. I think it's Wind something Aven. John knows the name because he's been playing limited. Windcaller Aven is just another 1-mana cycler that the deck gains with flying, which I think is super important. So it can play, I think it plays 7 of those now. And it actually came up and was not irrelevant that we killed a Phantasmal Image off of cycling a Windcaller Raven, which is pretty cool. So I think that if I do play Modern in the next couple weeks, it might be with that. Just see where that leads.
Let me interject here. For all my problems with the Unbans, I think the Magic community, Twitter, Reddit, Hivemind, they are as happy and vibrant and excited as I've ever seen them. And for that, I'm very happy for them. Even though I'm displaced and even though I think I'm a refugee right now, I'm happy that the format sounds or looks liberated, which even though I don't know, that's to be seen. And I'm happy for people that they're happy and they can start brewing these new cards because War and Modern Horizons have brought a lot of exciting build arounds, and I'm happy to see where it goes, even though it sucks for me.
We're gonna wrap it up with this segment. It's cool that the Facebook stream is working. No drop frames. So we're on Twitch. We're on Facebook. On my page. We're on Twitch.com/KLTMagic. Next week, we're probably going to try to make it so that I'm going to put it on the face-to-face games, either Facebook page or the First Strike page, just because Restream.io requires you to pay to stream, to restream it to a Facebook page. So I didn't want to pay unless we tested this to make sure it works. Because last time we started this, it was a disaster and we had to bail right away. Elliot, I consider you, especially on our discussion against Derek when it comes to card advantage, someone that's more math and stat oriented. And I think, whereas it does apply to a lot of, this is the last topic of the show, apply to a lot of people we might know or see at F&M, when we say someone constantly plays bad decks, that they would do a lot better if they played a real deck or one of the tier 1 decks. And but then in some cases, if that's not true, the person in question, whether they have more fun playing a specific deck or has put a lot of time in a specific archetype, would do better not playing, going off the beaten road. Or they might have stumbled upon something, as Alex has said, when he landed on Miracles or other funky decks that he has had to play on his road to success. So, Elliot, I'm going to put you on the spot here in front of John. Like, what's your take on that? Should he have played a real deck? Go.
Oh, I was hoping there was more so I could think a bit. In terms of the random person at your local F&M, I think the important takeaway for sure is that everybody gets something different out of Magic. Not everybody wants to go to F&M and it's a failure if they don't 3-1 and win their pack or something. Some people just want to show up for the sake of Magic. I know I've joked about it a lot, but it's genuinely true. I do enjoy the gathering a lot, and there's people who just go to F&M so that they can be with 20 like-minded people and have some fun. So in terms of John, it's a little trickier because obviously he's going to events with the idea that he wants to win. There is like a big deal of player preference in decks as well. I know that when I was new to Magic, I played almost exclusively mid-range decks because that's what I was immediately comfortable with the most. And it took quite a bit of time for me to start to transition into more combo and unfair decks, as well as learn some control decks. And I definitely got bailed out by the fact that like Abzan Company was the perfect bridge between combo and mid-range. So that's how I kind of like ended up picking up the skills that I applied when I can pick up a deck now. And I don't think it's necessarily true that 100% of the room's best shot at winning Grand Prix Las Vegas was through playing Hogaak. There's definitely people who have edges with their decks, and if everyone was playing Hogaak, you lose that edge immediately. There is also some, I forget what the term is, but like maybe because you were into poker, when you're like near a pay bubble or something and your play style changes. What would you know the word for that?
They called it like ICM considerations, but I don't know the.
Yeah. Okay. So there are some considerations for if we know going into a tournament that 35% of the meta is Hogaak. There's considerations for playing a deck, because 35% is a good chunk, but it's also not, you're not going to play it every single round. So there's both considerations for playing a deck like Neobrand, that if you play against Hogaak 7 times in this tournament, which isn't the most unreasonable thing, that you're going to be 7-0 no matter what. And there's also considerations for playing a deck that can't beat Hogaak, because at the end of the day is only 35% of the meta game. I don't know about John. I only played Hogaak twice, and it was rounds 3 and 4. He's giving me the number 1. So we saw the numbers. It was like 20%, 20 something percent of day 2. I played it 0 times day 2. John played it 0 to 1 times day 2. So, did John have a fairly middling result with his anti-Hogaak deck? Yeah, but if he played Hogaak twice more instead of some of the other decks, maybe it's not so middling. Maybe he has a top 8. From here, if I'm John's mental coach and I'm trying to get him in the best position for his 3-week away PTQ, do I guide him towards like Twiddle Storm or some other new degenerate combo deck, or do I say like, hey man, I'm going to put Stoneforge Mystic in your hands, and I'm going to put Noble Hierarch in your hands, and you're going to learn something new here? I really don't know. It's really up to him.
I do think John doesn't give himself enough credit when he thinks he's too crappy or too bad to play blue white control. Man, only I was afraid because we talked about it last episode where we mentioned why we might not see people play Hogaak in MCQ. It's hard to get a hold of deck. People don't want to switch it, don't want to buy it because of the incoming ban and actually happened. And I was actually worried. I don't know if I mentioned it on the show, but I personally felt worried because I wanted John to face more good matchups, and I feared that it wasn't going to be as high as it would be for him. And that him telling me that he only played it once just makes me like shake my head. Like I wish more people could afford or always bring Hogaak to the table. Wish the ban date was like further out. But what? Go ahead, John.
Hey, one thing here, KYT, how many freaking people go to a GP and O2 drop their MCQ, limited MCQ? Not many. Like I'm very realistic with my skills, man. Like I'm a very good player in terms of like combo, maybe aggro, but my fundamentals are ragged. On Sunday I went to the M20 field, built my pool, which I think was medium, and immediately like 04, 02 dropped. And I didn't feel I think I deserved it. I feel like my opponents like ran circles around me. I didn't know what to prioritize. I didn't really care to do like combat math or looking ahead for a few turns and like resource planning and all that. So someday I'll be better, but I'm not going to pretend and say I'm like a good player because I don't think I am. I'm just good at what I can and what I want to do.
What you said? What you went O2 at your first one? MCQ or PT?
The sealed MCQ, GP Las Vegas. Okay. I assure you, no matter how bad your pool is, no truly good player is going to go O2 drop.
I mean, I don't think I agree with that. I don't think Elliot agrees with that.
Yeah, definitely no.
What tournament? No, you're too hard on yourself.
Yeah, if an O2 drop means I'm not a good player, woof.
Like in a sealed PTQ where the first 2 rounds are like really soft. I don't know, man. Like,
but maybe your opponents were saying the same thing. Like I played against the softest opponents the first 2 rounds. Like it's hard to know sometimes how good your opponents are.
I suppose so.
Yeah, definitely. I played against Final Nub in round 1 of a limited MCQ. I'm screwed. So there's that. Now you're making me curious about the actual math, Elliot. At some point when we play tournaments, there are tournaments where we're like, okay, the meta game is so flat, it doesn't even matter that much. It's not going to shift either way. But I think I'm going to ask like Sean Gifford. I'm curious, just like these poker solvers that solve the ending of a tournament. If you adjust and say, it's probably been done before, like by Frank Carson or whatever. But if you have a good matchup and it's 35% of the field, and let's just assume the rest of the matchups, like the rest of the field is closer to 50 or have some bad matchups. What's the EV of playing Neoform? I'd actually be curious in the math of.
I think the problem is that it's you're going to be working with way too many assumptions because it's impossible to know going in the exact proportion of decks that people play, especially at a Grand Prix that's like 2,000 players. So you can get like a rough idea. Sure, we know going in we just had 3 GPs before or 2 GPs in the SCG. We know Hogaak's going to be 25% or whatever. But then the other issue is that it's so impossible to get a reasonably sized data set to get the percentages of win rates. Back in the day when we had, I know it popped up on Goldfish and Sean Gifford's blog as well, when you used to be able to mine all of the moto data, and you'd be able to see like the specific matchup by match win rates per deck. Maybe then you could kind of get an idea, but like right now the best you can do is, I know Hogaak's going to be between 20 and 30%, and I know my win rate against Hogaak's between 54 and 63%. So I think it's like too loose to get an actual idea.
That's a good point.
But if you want to spitball and say, I'll take my chances, sure.
I think the spitball is worth it just because let's say what John's doing is sort of spitballing without like simming it, right? Just like I'm bringing Neoform because Hogaak's public enemy number 1. I expect an edge because I expect to face it often enough. And I wonder if like, I just plug in a few numbers, 25%, 35%, maybe it'll give me like if it's really close, then it's not going to give me the answer because then it's like, okay, it could go either way. But if somehow the sim shows me like it's really slanted towards one way, then I know. But you're right. There's way too many variables, and then there's a lot of bad matchups that are impossible to know how the exact percent that are going to show up. So it would be a tough task. But again, when you're bringing something like this, you're sort of doing it in your head anyways. In a way, you're assuming a lot of things, and you're like, okay, like in Montreal. Sometimes I'd be like, there's gotta be a lot of mono red, so I should bring this deck. So I'm just sort of doing behind the scenes math. So maybe if I put it together, I'll have a more informed choice, or maybe not. Maybe it's just garbage.
There's just like a lot of like incomplete information assumptions that you have to make for these types of analysis, right? So what I like to do is like Andrew Ellenbogen once said, like modern is about, or magic is about making the best inferences out of limited information. So like a lot of the pre-tournament prep I do is qualitative, not quantitative. But we do know conceptually, and Carsten has said this, but I think a deck with higher variance, i.e. higher, a more polar matchup spread is way bigger favorite than against like with like Jund, for example, which has a much narrower matchup spread band. So but there's a lot of randomness, right? Like so for those who play DFS, like Car, for example, like there's a lot of value in fading the most popular player. And if the most popular player is like 30-35%, there's value in like zagging when everyone's zigging. And the concept is not 100% naturally transferable, but I do think of that sort of stuff as well when I do think about deck selection in Magic as well. So just some food for thought.
John, can you repeat that concept? What did he say? He said like something with higher variance. You're paraphrasing him, so I would love to.
So yes. So let's think of like a deck in 2 terms. 1 is EV or win percentage, and 2 is like the variance. Right. So a deck can be a 51% win rate deck, and there's no variance. So against literally every deck in the format, it's 51% to win.
So we're comparing, let's say, Neoform versus Jund, right? Let's just...
Those are very good representations, okay? Let's say Jund is like pretty close against most of the field. Okay. So therefore, in a given matchup, you can be like anywhere from 45% win a favorite to 55%. Okay. Let's say Neoform, for example. Neoform against Tron, Neoform against Burn is like a 70-80% like a lopsided matchup. Okay, whereas like Neoform versus Blue-White, for example, might be like a 30-70 matchup. What Frank is positing is that, like, because there's so much variance in matchups to begin with here, the higher variance or the more polar your matchup spread is, i.e. the more 20-80s and 80-20s that you have, the more likely it is for you to spike a tournament, i.e. get 13 wins out of 15 rounds. That's what he means.
Because at some point you're going to play, I guess the argument is at some point you're going to play a tournament where all your 70s or 80s line up. I guess that's like the value in that.
Exactly.
That's really interesting.
And it does have a flip side as well, where if your 80-20 deck has 20 80s, then you might play a tournament where you totally bomb it. but you're less likely to get like an 11-4 finish, let's say. Even though John got one, like Jund is like the archetypical 11-4 deck in the hands of a good player, whereas Neoform, if you run it 100 times, it's going to be a lot more top eights and a lot more missed day twos.
This is really interesting. This is a topic I was telling John I wanted to cover with Alex because one of the biggest critics, one of the more known critics to John's selection. He means no harm. He loves John. Respects his play skill. Is David Rood, Pro Tour player, Pro Tour winner, former Pro Tour winner, and I think he's not the only one who thinks that. It's been since I've been playing. Some people just don't like decks that have a reasonable, what they feel reasonable to high fail rate, and for me, some of that is because you feel like you want to be if you feel you're a good player, you definitely don't want that because you feel like you want to make the most out of games that can be played. So for example, Jund, let's say even though it might be 45-55, if you're a better player and the game actually plays out where there's meaningful decisions on both sides, you're going to eke out that extra percentage. So in your hands against a weaker opponent, it no longer becomes 45-55. It could become 50-60 in a lot of matchups. But I mean, what Frank Carlson just said about like winning a tournament and D-Root just saying that Neil Brand is a bad choice because you're off. He thinks it's gonna end up finishing 11-4 a lot of the times because the deck's gonna fail X amount of the time. And to that you say what, Elliot?
It that kind of goes back a bit to like the player preference as well. I think there is a lot of value in having agency in Magic. Like if not for anything else, your like mental health, because one of the absolute worst things in Magic is like sitting down for a match and having just no chance to win. It's part of the reason I've kind of wanted something from Neobrand to get banned, and I think John agrees with me, is like the fact that it can turn one win. The fact that you could potentially sit down in a match and through like no fault of your own, you'll play 100% perfectly, but you die without getting a turn. So playing a deck that is more likely to give you agency from the flip side, where it's your own deck playing out its game plan in the way it was designed to, does have something to do with like how you feel about the game. So, if you are a Jund player and you play against a combo deck, let's say it's not Neoform, so you're getting a turn, and you get to play your Thoughtseize, and then the second turn you maybe play your Tarmogoyf, and you play another piece of interaction, and you lose anyway. But at least you interacted, you had fun, you executed your game plan. Whereas if you're on the Neo brand side of things, where you keep like a turn 2 hand and get Thoughtseized, and then you die and you never combo, that's you hitting your fail rate. But if you're okay with that, then by all means. And it's not necessarily always like a play skill thing, because there's a big history of the best players in the world playing decks with high fail rates. It just has to go with where you've like weighed the risk in the tournament.
John, I'm gonna let you respond. The last thing I wanted to say was there could be an argument where like Jund has always been, people pick up Jund because it's like the 45%, 55% deck, and maybe people are assuming that too strong for modern, because there's some decks, there's some matchup even as Jund where it like you're not really playing any Magic against certain matchups.
Tron.
Tron or there is a fail rate against the combo decks if you don't draw any of your Thoughtseizes, any of your discard spells. So at that point, maybe you mulligan into them and still don't get there, and you lose to their turn 2, turn 3 combo. But go ahead, John. I'm really happy you brought up this article before I dived more into this topic of choosing a deck.
So let me address like 3 points here. One, I think what David, I disagree with what David was saying with regards to, like if you play such a inconsistent deck, you're destined for 11-4 and 10-5. So mathematically, I don't believe that's true, assuming that the expected value or the win rate, the mean win rate, is the same, like given all else equal. If you have a higher variance deck or a higher matchup spread, then you're more likely your range of outcomes actually becomes wider, not narrower. So by that count, if I'm I'm a 55% win rate Neobrand player, and I'm also 55% Jund player, then I'm more likely to spike an event. And I tweeted the Toby Hinkie, not Frank Carson article just now. So for listeners who wants to have a look, you can have a look there. So that's number one.
Okay, apologies. Number two, so that's Toby Hinkie. Okay, not Frank Carson.
Toby Hinkie.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Yeah. So number two, like I think agency is a bit overrated. I think that I definitely get the sentiment that if you're a better player, you want to outplay your opponent, and you want to therefore have a deck that can give you an opportunity to outplay your opponent. I agree that that is a thing. However, it's one factor in a bigger picture, and I think deck selection is also agency, as well as hand selection, which is also an agency. It's just a different type of area of agency that people like to feel they have control of. And I'm fine with that. If people want to feel like they're in control when they make their discard or counterspell decisions, I'm fine with that. Everyone's different. But I don't think it's wise to really ignore deck selection as well as metagame like evaluation that goes into the deck selection and hand selection, which are three of the most important things for Neoform. Like that's agency too. It's just a different form. And some people just don't want to be at the mercy of the draw 7 or the draw 6 or what the hand mulligan, and that's fine. But I think it's a bit disingenuous to like ignore that as a aspect of agency as well.
I think it's also important to note that something that's like maybe less obvious to people who like haven't taken statistics courses and things like that is that if a deck has a 30% fail rate, that doesn't mean that it's going to fail in 30% of its matches in a 15-round tournament. It means that when you play a million matches, it's gonna fail around 300,000 of them. So when you play a Grand Prix, you could fail 0 matches. That's totally a reasonable outcome. And that outcome is, I don't want to do the math, but it's going to happen like 20% of the time where you never fail. And that's like, when you're playing, if that's how the math pans out, that's pretty insane because you can enter 5 Grand Prix and you're going to win one of them. That's something to consider.
Go ahead, John.
Elliot brings up a good point. Let me just add one more point here. The fail rate argument, I think, it doesn't look at the whole picture. And this is why Neoform, I thought, is a great choice last weekend. It's not about your deck's 20th percentile case losing against other people's 20th percentile case. Neoform's 20th percentile case is like you die to Goldfish. Like you die to like a turn 1 Goblin Guide and die horribly in 10 turns, right? Whereas a burn deck or a Jund deck's like 20th percentile case can at least like beat some hands. But you feel helpless as in your fail case as Neoform. But that's not the appeal of the deck. The appeal of the deck is the other, like I'm just making up numbers, but your 50th average percentile case easily beats like Hogaak's 70th percentile case. Or put more simply, your average hand beats a good hand from Hogaak or a great hand from Tron. That's like a big part of why you want to play Neoform. Your distribution of success and fail cases match up well versus the formats. Put another way, your best or your good, great, and best hands beats anyone else's great to best hands. That's why you want to be playing Neoform. There are fail cases for sure, but if you have your good, great, and excellent cases like enough of the times, it doesn't freaking matter, right?
Good stuff, guys. Really good stuff. I think this is opening my eyes a bit because I probably read the Toby Hinkie article before, but I've missed it. All this content's good. Elliot, you mentioned that example, and it reminds me of even if you go gambling with Magic players and you're at the roulette table, you will have even Magic players that you respect. Even if they see it land on red 5 times, they're going to think black and they're going to bet quite heavily on black. Well, that's been my experience. I don't know about you guys, but even if I surround myself with intellectuals, there's definitely superstition or people who fall like fall for these mathematical fallacies.
Yeah, and I just want to add one thing, which is again for the people who maybe haven't taken statistics at a higher level in school, which is it was like it's always one of the first assignments that I got in a statistics course. I don't know why every single one decided to touch on this. I think even in high school I saw this, where it's you have two dice rolling against each other and you have to determine which die is favored. So let's say that Jund is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6-sided die, a standard regular die, and uh, what John is looking for when he plays his deck selection, is a die that's closer to 3 sides are 6s and 3 sides are 0s. And so when you roll 6, you can beat everyone, and that's going to happen half the time, no matter what they roll. But half the time you're going to roll 0, and you'll automatically lose. So that's like a really cool concept for thinking about your fail rates, where maybe the new brand deck is more like it has a 7 2 6s and a 4 and a couple zeros or something like that. So that gives you an idea of sort of the range of the power level of your hands and how they line up against the range of the power levels of your opponents. And obviously, there's not just 6 possible hands in Magic, 6 possible outcomes, so it gets a lot more complicated than that. But that does, I think, paint a better picture of my good hands beat everyone else's good hands, but my bad hands lose to everyone's bad hands.
I think that's a way more digestible and more illustrative example. Elliot got it.
But John, do you have friends like that? Like I mentioned, that still like will bet, like be super, not I guess results oriented. Not really. I guess will bet on black if they see red like 5 times. It's like human nature, though. I can't even fault myself for doing that. Like, if I have to make a choice, I'm like, okay, I'll just put on black, man.
Well, of course, and a lot of my friends and coworkers think I'm a degenerate because I play like poker and like bet on other things. But I'm actually very risk averse, and I don't play blackjack or pai gow or like other stuff like that because it's like ABV. So I'm actually a pretty big buzzkill in that regard, where like emotions don't really sway me, and it's not like I have a hot round with black or red or whatever. If that's what you're asking.
Yeah. But man, a lot of good stuff. But I have to say, like, you brought good points that I didn't think about, like agency and in different aspects of the game, not just when the game starts, but before that, there's some selection as well. And my point is that at one point there were a lot more decisions that mattered, and the way I think Hayne and I are saying that now the way the game's going, the way it's being printed and cards are created are too powerful to the point where they matter less. Some games, like when I was rolling people with bat manipulation, it was just like I just got Nissa first and that's it. There wasn't that much skill involved after that. And at one point, I do feel like it mattered when I saw like Alex's crazy run of I don't know how like winning a GP is hard as you know, John. And he's won multiple in 1 year where he was piloting Sphinx's Revelation, Blue White, when it was probably at the time consensus most skilled deck in Standard. And I could see where that deck, which wasn't that like super dominant, how he could have exercised his skill over a long set of decisions to be able to get there, to be able to have a deck that's not a 730 deck, but consistently win GPs or top 8 them. So I think we're in a different era now, but which has me thinking that I should be, if I play the next modern MCQ, shifting towards a more swingy type of deck, and yeah, that's a lot to think about, and I hope our listeners gain something from this. P. Sams, has this affected your deck choice for your next tournament? Let us know in the chat, and people let us know on Twitter. And with that, what's next for you, John? Let's wrap this up.
Like as much as like half my collection, paper collection is like Gresham brand and Dredge, so like it's all evaporated. So, but it does give me an opportunity to kind of explore modern a bit, which is cool. and I do have an MCQ in 3 weeks. So, I'm just going to be a filthy casual and start playing like interesting decks that was being held back by Hogaak. And some of that include like goblins, which I think can like outgrind the hell out of blue white and has some really cool like gameplay and as well as goldfish opportunities. Bring to light snake shift, which I think was good before all of us in the BTL cabal kind of collectively agreed that Hogaak, we just can't be Hogaak. And maybe we'll see. Like I think Valakut would be what I would be on with Chandra Awoken Inferno if I were to play a serious game tomorrow. But I don't have that, so I'm just gonna take it easy and explore Modern a bit, like a Timmy.
All right, as Elliot, what he's up to already. So support the show. Go to patreon.com/firststrike. Thanks for watching on Facebook. Thanks for watching on Twitch. And thanks for subscribing to us on all the podcast platforms. And thanks to saying hi, people who came up to John and mentioned either his article on magic.facetofacegames.com or they're a First Strike listener, or anyone that comes up to me and Elliot at our different events. Really appreciate it. And with that, extra shout outs to P Sounds once again. We love you. You've never been declined to be on the show. It's just that I'm waiting for your first big finish in a long time. So stop playing bad decks, listen to this advice, and pick a high variance deck. And good luck. Love you.